Kristy Walson, who will be talking about requesting EPDs for manufacturers.
Thank you so much. Okay, next slide. I'm Kristy Walson with TLC Engineering. I'm going to be talking about the third prong of this commitment, which is to request environmental product declarations in project specifications for MEP system components. So it seems very simple, but we're not there yet. There's multiple steps in the process to get there. One of the parts of this process is we would expect the company plan that you create as the part of the first prong of this commitment to kind of elaborate and create a roadmap for how you plan on pushing the industry to generate EPDs and how you will be requesting EPDs on your MEP system equipment. These UL, SCS, ASTM, and NSF are the primary EPD providers in the United States, but there are many more globally. I just wanted to provide an example of who is able to provide environmental product declarations. And then we're going to be going through a couple key points here. What are EPDs, why they're important, what types are available, how to start the process, and then a timeline for what we hope could be for requesting EPDs from manufacturers. So, an environmental product declaration, for anyone who is not familiar, is a transparent, objective report that communicates what a product is made of and how it impacts the environment across its entire life cycle. It's a consistent framework for reporting the whole life cycle, excuse me, impact of a material or a product in the industry. Next slide, please. And this is an example of what one looks like. This is a UL generated EPD. This is the front page of one. They are all very consistent across the board, especially if they're coming from the same provider, and they all are expected to provide similar information, including the operator, the declaration holder. That's an important key piece. It's duration of validity. And all these key pieces of information are included in what typically is the second page. Next, click one more time. You can see within, these are all snapshots taken from within the same EPD. So within the multiple page EPD, they are addressing a full life cycle assessment of the material or the product, from raw material for production being extracted all the way through end of life disposal of the product. One more. And then here's the environmental impact of the product. And this is where it gets into what we're talking about here in terms of embodied carbon. And they typically do this, these are ceiling tiles. So this would be per unit of measure. So a 2x2 module, they did this by 1 square foot of the system. For an MEP product, it might be a different metric, but we'll get into that in just a second. So there's multiple types of EPDs. The first one is a product specific declaration. I'd say this is the least stringent of all of the EPD options. Click one more time. There's an industry-wide or generic EPD, and this is for products that have a generic use across the industry. Let's just say, glossy white paint as an example. There is a standard across all providers of a common type of product. And this industry-wide or generic EPD is available for that common product. And then next, and then you have your very specific type 3 EPDs that would be exactly what I just showed you as an example. It's specific to the product that comes from the manufacturer. And it's specific to a single manufacturer, not to multiple manufacturers. Go ahead, one more click. Oh, I think from our perspective, we see the industry-wide generic EPD as an option for the way to get EPDs most quickly to market for MEP systems. And we want this to happen quickly with, not an incredible burden to all the manufacturers. So collaborating across manufacturers on common equipment and getting EPDs industry-wide, we see as the quickest way for this to happen. And it will also, there is a cost to generating EPDs, but this would also spread the cost of generating those EPDs across multiple manufacturers. And a collaboration like that, we feel, is probably the quickest way for embodied carbon to start coming out of our MEP systems. Next slide. So starting the EPD process. So the first step, obviously, we would recommend that you go through one of the EPD providers. You have to. You can go through, sorry, there was a note in the chat, but you can go through multiple providers. You can choose which provider, but the first step will always be to look at the product category rule, which is the PCR. It's the piece of information that defines how to conduct the LCA for the product category being assessed. In the case of MEP equipment, you can go ahead and click one more time. There is a PCR search library. There's actually a few online available to see where PCRs have been created for MEP equipment, but the reality is they haven't been created for all MEP pieces of equipment and materials. And so one of the things the EPD provider can do is to also help generate the PCR for a particular piece of equipment or product if it doesn't already exist, and that would be part of the EPD process as well. One more click. Okay. So this is an example of a timeline for what we would envision as a steering committee to be an achievable, impactful timeline for products to receive EPDs so that they're available when the MEP engineer puts EPDs as a requirement in the specifications for MEP equipment. Sorry, one second. The timeline is tentative and very, very rough, but I'll tell you the main part of the effort that's gone into it at this point. It was to identify the most used pieces of equipment so that when EPDs are procured, they are impacting a large amount of projects. And so we identified those main first tier pieces of equipment to be package rooftop units, PTACs, package heat pumps, VRF systems, and condensing units. We did some research, took some polls, and across the board, these seem to be the most often used pieces of equipment. So we would hope that manufacturers could use this timeline as kind of a roadmap as to what they should be going into and getting their EPDs for first. And it lays it out across from January 2023 through January 2026. And it's just a way of us assisting the manufacturers for prioritizing the EPDs. And of course, as we said, we very much encourage the generic industry-wide EPD. So a collaboration across manufacturers to get that package rooftop unit EPD would be encouraged by us.